So, Lu Xiaojun has tested positive for a banned substance. One of the greatest weightlifters of all time, and he's possibly making use of performance-enhancing drugs. Shocking, I know. But there are some interesting things going on beneath that initial flashy news headline. First of all, he tested positive for EPO, or erythropoietin, which some of you may be familiar with from cycling or other more endurance-based sports, something which Olympic weightlifting is very much not. EPO is a hormone already found in the body, responsible for regulating the amount of oxygen-carrying red blood cells present in the bloodstream. People can naturally have deficiencies or excess amounts, but in the case of athletes, having an excess can be incredibly useful, especially for those endurance sports. Having a higher amount of red blood cells means that more oxygen can be carried around the body and shuttled into the muscles and tissue that require oxygen to keep on working. And so for sports where the muscles have to work for a very long time, having the ability to work for longer is a clear advantage. But why would someone use it who is working for relatively short periods, like in weightlifting, where you really only exert force maximally 6 times, with each being not much more than a few seconds? Well, one major issue there is that you are only counting the final output and not the decades of work put in to get there in the first place. And we know Lu has been tested and caught out of competition, so his use of EPO aligns with the period of training rather than competing. And as we said, having the increased ability to do work means that you can just do more work. And if you can do more work, you can get a much better training stimulus, and if the body is continuing to supply the muscle with oxygen, you are at less risk of training in excess. And if, obviously, he has not tested positive for anything else, but theoretically, if Lu was perhaps taking anything else that would increase the results of that work, having this increased top-end capacity with an increased return from any capacity puts an athlete on these substances at quite supraphysiological levels of trainability. The Chinese weightlifters in particular have an unusually high focus on hypertrophy and bodybuilding training alongside the basics, and it is coming into light that more and more bodybuilders who otherwise do not need that high-end work capacity are also making use of EPO to increase the volume of the muscles and the overall blood flow and supply, which ties in neatly to the extremely lean and muscular appearance of a Chinese weightlifting team. You also have to factor in the levels of a more traditional medicine styles of thinking that are very prevalent in China, so it's entirely possible that there are other ideas behind the use too. For example, it isn't such a large leap to think that this increased volume of oxygen-enriched blood will work to stretch the fibers of the muscles and lead to tiny micro tears which over time need to be repaired and grow back bigger and stronger, or that the red blood cells flowing into the muscles might drag other nutrients in there on the way, just like bodybuilders in the 90s had the understanding of insulin working as a PED before it became more widespread knowledge about the exact mechanisms. There are also things like Lu being an older athlete, so maybe he needs that enhanced blood flow more than others, or that the competition around that time period sat at 2,640 meters above sea level, while the Chinese national training camp is only at around 20 meters above sea level, so perhaps the plan was to boost red blood cell count to compensate for that reduced oxygen in competition. But why was he popped? Was it just bad luck? Did an ITA tester sneak in and extract blood while he slept? Was he a sacrificial lamb to keep the rest clean? Well, there are plenty of factors that point to each of these theories being possible, and given the known corruption and shenanigans going on behind the scenes at all levels, they each seem to hold weight. So, let's look at a few. Bad luck. This seems unlikely given how very few Chinese lifters test positive in general. It is very likely that the system in place is very tightly controlled and resistant to mistakes, especially with these highest level athletes who already have proven abilities and can keep on returning value. However, Lu Xiaojun is already well past the traditional expiry date of an athlete, being almost 40 years old. And in upcoming events there are much younger and potentially more suitable athletes ready to compete in the weight classes, whereas Lu would have to adjust his body weight from normal and compete against someone younger and already more proven in that position. So in that case you could see how being a sacrifice as an already finished athlete makes sense and aligns with other cases like Ilya Ilyin and Dmitry Klokov. But why would there even need to be a sacrifice, and why at the top level with the most famous athlete? Following that route seems to lead to the testing agency and the Chinese organizers working together, with the testing agency offering something that benefited the Chinese even more than keeping their 3-time Olympians record intact. Something like an allowance for other athletes who still have results to pull in to add to the overall glory count. An agreement not to test these athletes would certainly be attractive for the greater good, but it still puts the reputation of the whole Chinese team and system into question. If their top-level athletes are using PEDs, why would any other of their top-level athletes not be? Lu Xiaojun himself has put out a statement in response where he seems to outright deny the use of EPO or any other PED at all. So on that end, he seems to be unprepared to just accept and let the news and his legacy fade into obscurity. The whole thing is messy and filled with convoluted potential conspiracies, which seems to be exactly what weightlifting itself has become at this stage. And perhaps that complexity with an inability to draw hard and conclusive answers is what the powers that be want to be the case. Because if you can't see an answer, you can't concretely put the blame on anybody. And that's it. We'll get back to real sports like arm wrestling next time, but these stories for sports outside of the norm certainly bring up interesting points to bring back into the sport. Check out the Patreon for programming, the Discord for discussion, and I'll see you next time.